One of the things that came out of the trip of the 10 students to Milwaukee was, although it was all expense paid scholarships, what they were required to do is they were each assigned a particular area of interest. They agreed by accepting the scholarship that when they came back, they would produce a publishable quality paper on the application of restorative justice in that area of practice of law. And so what has happened is now they're in the process, the papers have been submitted, they're in the process of being edited, and they're going to be compiled in what amounts to a how-to manual. And it's going to be passed out to judges, professors, public schools, and it's basically how to administer restorative justice in these different areas of life, law, whatever. So that came out of that trip to Milwaukee, which was very, very much impressed the administration and the faculty at St. Mary's, because now they have students who are basically producing law journal quality papers on restorative justice. And they're doing it for no credit. And they were impressed by the fact that law students would take that much self-initiative and were that committed to restorative justice that they would do that. And so it gained us a lot of ground in the eyes of the faculty and the administration, because no other organization was doing anything like that. Like I said, when I was working with the criminal defense attorneys in Austin, I just was impressed with the fact that the system just did. I wasn't sure what justice was, but I was certain it wasn't whatever was happening at the courthouse. There was nothing just about any of it. The victims weren't being helped. The offenders weren't being helped. The community wasn't being helped. It looked like it cost everyone a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of heartache. And so I was struggling with this idea of, well, what is justice? And as I researched restorative justice and became familiar with it, I could see that the way restorative justice defined justice, that it wasn't something that was imposed upon people, that was declared. It was whatever the stakeholders involved in the event, whatever harm suffered, both offender and victim, whatever they said justice was. And that's when the healing occurred, when they came to a place where they said justice had been accomplished. And I could see that that's the only real way it could be. That's the only real way that people could be restored to communities, that relationships could be restored, that people could find peace and healing in their lives after suffering sometimes traumatic events and suffering great harm and causing great harm. And so I just, as a law student, as a lawyer, I really had no desire to be involved in this headbutting, this contentious construct of a justice system that I was being trained to be a participant in. It just didn't interest me. I didn't want to try to win and have somebody else have to lose in order for me to win, because I knew in my own personal life that it never worked out, ever. In instances where I thought I had won, I really didn't win at all. And so I wanted to be a part of a system where there were win-win situations, and where people, when it was all said and done, they said, I have received justice. And both parties said that, and they walked away whole again, in as much as whatever they decided wholeness was. And so I wanted to be, that's the way I wanted to practice law. And I wanted to practice law in a system that was designed for those results. And I knew that system didn't exist anywhere where I was probably going to hang a shingle. So that I could only think that if there was any chance of that ever occurring, it was going to have to start in law school. I wasn't going to be able to go out there and convince a judge who'd been sitting on the bench for 15 years to try this new system of jurisprudence. It was going to happen by some law student going out and being exposed to it in law school, and after they had sat on the bench for 5 years, they would start using it in the adjudication of their cases. They would start encouraging lawyers to become interested in it. There's, lawyers, prosecutors who have been exposed to it in law school would start telling their supervisors, I'd like to try this on this case. That's how it was going to change. And so I thought, if we can get something like that started in law school, and particularly in St. Mary's, who's a Marianist university, very much community-minded, very attuned to social justice issues. If we could get it started in a school like St. Mary's and have some support behind it by the administration, that I thought that, maybe that might be a ripple effect that might spread out across the community, maybe to other law schools across the state of Texas. I know there are other places in the United States, like Marquette in Milwaukee, that have made incredible inroads into the community. I mean, they have been a force in that community that has truly brought about change in Milwaukee County. You go up there and restorative justice permeates almost every area of that community in one way or the other. And I was, maybe in a very idealistic way, thought, well, if it can happen in Milwaukee County, why can't it happen in San Antonio, Texas? And if it happens in San Antonio, Texas, why can't it happen in Texas in general? And if it happens in Texas, why can't it happen in every other state? So that's just kind of that's where my thinking was anyway. Well, after graduation, I began to study for the bar immediately after graduation, and the bar exam in Texas is the 28th, 9th, and 30th of July. And so that's going to consume most of my time and effort and concentration up until that time. But I have been hired by a criminal defense firm in Austin, Texas, and I start with them on the 1st of September. And my intentions are to practice criminal defense law, but also to use what I've learned about restorative justice and the principles and processes involved to help my clients, both in regards to whatever offense they may be charged with, but also just in their life in general, to help them maybe incorporate those same practices into their life and relationships in their lives. Because I know when I worked for criminal defense attorneys, sometimes the offense that people were charged with was really one of the most minimal things going on in their lives. They had a lot of other bigger problems, and a lot of times they'd call up to talk to me as a legal assistant, and they'd never talk about the DWI they had. They talk about the problems they were having there with their kids or at their work or something like that. And I can see that people, if attorneys are if the law is going to be for people and not just for the law's sake, the law is going to be for people, then attorneys need to help the entire person in all areas of their life. Just getting them out of a tight spot in regards to the law may be the least that an attorney can do, and maybe helping them be able to find some peace by employing restorative processes in their life might be the most good an attorney can do to someone in that situation. So that's what I hope to do. I'm also have been in contact with Ellen Halbert and some other folks in Austin who continue to work in the area of restorative justice, and I hope to be able to assist them and perhaps through my contacts with folks in schools to try to implement restorative justice in the schools there in the Austin area. And I'm gonna keep on doing what I've been doing, and where it leads, I don't know, but I know I'm convinced that this restorative practices in all areas of life have resulted in a better life for me. And if it results in a better life for me, there's no reason why it can't help somebody else.